Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So as you can tell by the title of the video, I'm going to be talking to you today about my experience using Cytotec. So the reason that I had to use Cytotec was because I experienced a miscarriage. So I started bleeding on my own, but my body did not complete the miscarriage. So there was still, they call it products of conception, so there was still fetal tissue inside of my uterus that my body had not been able to expel. So Cytotec is also used if you have a missed miscarriage. Unfortunately, this pregnancy, this was my third miscarriage, so I have got some blood work. I haven't got the results back, all of the results back, but all of the results that I have got have all been normal, so basically they can't find a reason for why I miscarried. So I will just start you from the beginning. I was 7 weeks and 1 day pregnant. I started having some very light cramping and spotting, and I knew immediately that that wasn't normal. It started out really light, got a little bit heavier throughout that day, and I bled, I would say, relatively heavily for about 3 or 4 days, and then it tapered off, but I didn't stop bleeding. So I continued light bleeding and spotting for 2 weeks. From the start of my, when I first started bleeding, for 2 weeks. And then I stopped bleeding for a couple days, and my doctor had told me that when my bleeding stopped, she wanted me to get lab tests drawn to see what my HCG levels were. So I went in and had my labs done, and my HCG was still 1,037. Obviously that means that you haven't expelled all of the tissue, or sometimes like your body just takes a little bit of time to go back down to 0. So they went ahead and scheduled me for an ultrasound. And when I got the ultrasound, it showed that there, basically like the gestational sac was still attached to my uterine wall. So my doctor told me that I could either try the Cytotec, and she thought that most likely that I would have success with that since I'd already been bleeding so much and there wasn't a lot of tissue to expel. And then if the Cytotec didn't work, then I would have to have a D&C. Or she told me that if I wanted to go ahead and have a D&C at that point that I could. But since I'd already been going through the bleeding for so long, honestly, I didn't want to also have surgery on top of that. I didn't want to. I know that with the D&C, there's a risk for scarring and a risk for damage to your cervix, and I just didn't want to have to do that if it wasn't an absolute necessity. So it'd been about a total of 3 weeks of bleeding before I started the Cytotec. Okay, so I started the Cytotec at 5 o'clock on day 1, and my order for Cytotec was 200 milligram tablets, and she wanted me to insert those vaginally. So you can also dissolve them in your mouth, in your cheek. If you just swallow the pills whole, then they can cause a lot of like GI issues like diarrhea and that type of thing. So I did that at 5 p.m. and my dose was to be repeated in 24 hours. So at 5 p.m. on the second day, I inserted the second 2 pills, and she did tell me that if my bleeding was super heavy by this point, not to insert them vaginally, that you should definitely put them into your cheek and dissolve them, because if you're bleeding, then it would just push the pills out. But I was barely spotting, so I inserted those 2 and waited again, and honestly, nothing. And then I woke up in the middle of the night, and I did have some cramping, and what I would relate this to or explain it to someone as feeling just like regular menstrual cramps. I mean, it wasn't that bad. It was slightly uncomfortable. It did wake me up out of my sleep, but I went back to sleep and woke up in the morning, and my bleeding was totally gone, nothing. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, there's no way this is not working. So I called my doctor and I explained what was going on, and I said, the bleeding is totally gone now. And she said, that doesn't seem like it's probably normal. She said, well, what we can do is either wait until Tuesday and look on your ultrasound, and maybe like there was just so little tissue that your body had already expelled it, or I can write you a dose for more Cytotec. And she said, if you do that, then it will be 3 tablets inserted vaginally, and it'll be 12 hours apart. So I was like, let's just do it. I mean, I've already gotten this far. It hasn't been that bad. So she wrote an order for those. I went to the pharmacy to go and pick them up, and on my way home, I felt like a gush come out like 3 times. And I know that this is very much TMI. Oh, I didn't even I guess I didn't even warn anyone that this is going to be a TMI video. Since it's called Cytotec, I mean, and it's a miscarriage story, you probably knew what you were getting into when you clicked on the video. So it's going to only get more TMI from here. So there's your last warning, and let's keep going. So I felt a few gushes of blood. I would say at least 3 on the way home, and I was like, okay, like we're getting somewhere here. So I went home, got home, ran into the bathroom, sat on the toilet, and like there was just more and more and just more blood, and like I could see some clots, and like where the blood had gushed out, I looked at it and there was some clots in that. So I sat there for a few more minutes, and I felt like a slimy, huge thing plop out of me, and it didn't hurt at all. It just went, and it like fell in the toilet. So I fished it right on out and took a look at it, and I am about 99% sure that that was the gestational sac. It was still totally intact. It was like about this big. I will, at the very end, I will insert a picture of it, and if you're not squeamish and you're going through this and you want to know like what you might be looking for, I feel like that would be helpful. If you're not going through this, I might not look at that, because I mean, I'm just telling you what it is right now. So that came out of me, and I hadn't taken any more of the Cytotec, and I texted my doctor, and my doctor and I've known her forever. She's actually married to my cousin, so that's why I feel like I'm probably talking to her more than what some people might talk to their doctor. But I texted her and I said, this just came out of me, like, do you feel like I probably went ahead and passed the rest? Like, should I go ahead and take the second dose? And she said, that probably is what that is probably the gestational sac. However, there's not going to be any harm in you taking more Cytotec. It's just going to make you cramp more, and she said you are nowhere near the maximum amount of dose, because if you were further along, we would have given you way more. So it's not going to be unsafe for you to take that. So I went ahead and took the next dosages of Cytotec just to be 100% sure, because I really wanted to avoid the DNC at all costs after I've already been through basically almost, in total it was almost 4 weeks of just bleeding. Most of it was just spotting, but still it's really hard to see, like, I had already processed the miscarriage and felt like I went through that already, and then to know that basically it's like I had to do it twice. So by this point, I just wanted like some closure, and just to kind of be out of that realm and be able to move forward, and just, how do I even say that? I don't know. I feel like I might sound insensitive, which I'm not at all. I bawled my eyes out for the beginning of this miscarriage, but you know, eventually there's nothing more that you can do, and then at that point it just becomes dangerous to be retaining that tissue. And so I was ready to have my uterus just be like cleansed and not have to worry about infection. So that was all. The Cytotec was able to remove all of the fetal tissue. However, I did have to do 2 dosages, which maybe I didn't have to, but I went ahead and did them. I feel like my experience is different because it took quite a lot longer for the Cytotec to kick in. It wasn't until after the second dose, like hours later. Like I took it at I took my second dose at 5 p.m. and then it wasn't until the next day around 11 a.m. before it started kicking in. And a lot of people just, it happens way sooner. But it was effective, and if you're looking for a non-surgical means for, you know, helping you through a missed miscarriage, or just retaining tissues after you've naturally miscarried, I would suggest it. I never thought it was painful, and at all. Like, not even, I would maybe rate it a 1.5 out of 10 pain. And I've listened to so many other stories, and I know that no one else said that, and I feel like that made it like scary, but I definitely don't think it was. So I hope this video is helpful. I'm sorry that it was a little bit TMI, and I will insert the picture of, I believe, the gestational sac right now. So if you don't want to see that, make sure you click off. And thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you in my next one. Bye guys.